The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the producer and those appearing in this show and do not necessarily represent the views of DerryCAM, the town of Derry, or any of its staff or affiliates.
Hi, I'm Anthony Henry. Welcome back to America's Ass. We are on episode 23, and we got some. It's all repeated topics. It's still all the big topics we've been talking about. Sure, you're all fine with it because you're all still interested. But anyway, our guest today is another returning guest. Please welcome Representative Layon. So, introduce yourself to anyone who doesn't know you.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm State Representative Layon. I'm one of the 10 representatives here for Derry. I am the Vice Chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee, and I'm also on the Administrative Rules Committee, as long as a few others. So I spend a lot of time in Concord trying to make sure that things are getting done right, and I'm very, very happy to be back on the show today with Anthony.
Thank you for coming on short notice. We had another guest that had something, so they couldn't go. So thank you for coming on 2-hour notice.
Oh, you're welcome. Anything to help you out, Anthony.
So anyway, we'll get into the big new topic. This happened literally an hour ago. We finally have a speaker in D.C., and it was not who anyone expected. It's Representative Mike Johnson. He was the vice chair of the Republican conference, I believe. Relatively obscure congressman, but seems to be average. No big personality like McCarthy or Scalise or Jordan or Donalds or any of the others that were trying to be speaker. So I think for a lot of people, they're going to find it refreshing to just have some average guy no one knew as Speaker of the House, third most powerful position in federal government.
I think it's very exciting that there's a speaker in D.C. It's been a challenge watching them for the last several weeks without a speaker.
21 days.
21 days. And looking at it and seeing what Matt Gaetz did, I was a little surprised, but going back and seeing that he said that if the Republicans support a continuing resolution, he'll vacate the chair. He did exactly what he said he was going to do. And I'm glad that they're able to come to an agreement and finally have a speaker, because a couple things are happening in the world right now, and it's important to have our government functioning.
Yeah, I think Matt Gaetz knew what he was doing the whole time, going way back to January when the original speaker election happened that went into like 15 rounds. He made sure McCarthy was at his will. Like he made sure McCarthy was around his finger. And he put all these requirements that McCarthy had to do if Gaetz was going to have his people support him. And this was one of them. Only one person could oust the chair, vacate the chair, which I think that's something that should change. I think that could end up being risky in the future, especially if it was a Democrat that made a motion to vacate. I think it should be like, I don't know, a third, something like that. But yeah, I think Matt Gaetz knew what he was doing the whole time. I think he's a political genius, really. I have a lot of people that know him personally in Florida, and they all say he definitely knew what he was doing. So, yeah.
That's great to hear. That's definitely great to hear, because I'm not as tuned into the national politics level, but to know that he'd had a plan definitely makes me feel better. The whole challenge with the vacating the chair, obviously, it's the vote. Here in New Hampshire, it has to be a majority. So even if there's a few people who are out sick, when we're in an evenly divided House, it still has to be 201 people to actually vote to vacate the chair. So knock on wood, assuming everybody stays in their seats, we won't be going through that here. And we have the example of a speaker who stepped up because we needed him. And I think Sherman Packard has been an amazing speaker. He stepped up when his friend Dick Hinch passed away not long after I was elected. And he's done a fantastic job keeping us together, especially in a small majority. And I'm very, very hopeful that Mike Johnson will be able to do the same in D.C.
I've also been tuned out lately to D.C. politics because I've been so immersed in local and state politics. We'll go into that later in the show. But yeah, when I got the notification McCarthy was out suddenly, I was like, interesting. And then as I started reading more and more, I remembered back in January. And January was really the last time I tracked the U.S. House, because that's when the original speaker vote happened that made us look like complete idiots to the Democrats. And I think this made us look dumb to the Dems too. They think we're divided now. So I do think it was a negative that we had all this, but I'm just going to be positive and hope Mike Johnson does well. And as for the State House, a lot of people on the Republican side are worried because now the Dems have inched it closer to an actual tie with the relatively unexpected election of Hal Rafter. Now we have a couple more special elections because Representative Troy Murner and Representative Hatch both resigned. And there was the controversy with both of them, especially Murner. But yeah, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if a Dem did make a motion to vacate the State House speakership. Because now that there's been an example at the federal level.
Exactly. The biggest part to know about that, though, is that in New Hampshire, it's not just a majority of those present. It would have to be 201. We have
Yeah.
2 that aren't seated, so it would have to be 199 right now. So even if you had a few people who are sick on the Republican side, they wouldn't be able to just look at the number of people in their seats and then make a move in order to change things. I think that that's very good, and that would take a rule change of 2/3 in order to change that structure in New Hampshire. And I think that we're good how we are.
So moving topics, we're going to talk about Israel. There's really not a lot I haven't covered on the show about it, but this is going to be the biggest foreign policy issue for the next long time, really. Many people think this is the start of World War III with this and Afghanistan and Russia and Ukraine and all that, and Yemen. Just a lot going on. So what are your thoughts?
Well, it's quite possible that this could lead into World War III. The question, though, is do we allow people to settle their disputes without piling in all of their allies in to fight a proxy war for them? I think that with the sneak attack that happened with Hamas, I think Israel is within its rights to defend itself, especially because they've been trying to work in peace. They've been trying to work together. Hamas was elected back in 2005, and then they did away with elections after that. So they've lost their mandate, their electoral mandate, but they're still remaining in power. Nobody there has done anything to remove them. And at this point now, they're attacking innocents. And that's not something that can be tolerated. And my hope is just that nobody is pulled in. My hope is that we don't have anybody caught in the crossfire where, like the USS Liberty, when that had been struck, that was something that brought us into a previous conflict, like Pearl Harbor. As long as we don't have any of these game changers, I think that we'll be able to navigate and stay out of World War III, but it's quite terrifying. And this whole situation actually ended up hitting pretty close to home to me. One of my friends has a 15-year-old daughter who's in school in Israel. And when everything was going on, I worked with Senator Birdsell trying to figure out how we could get contact on how to get her out if she needed to be evacuated, because she was in a bomb shelter with her host family. Unfortunately, she lives in Vermont, and unfortunately her senator called her dad and said, yeah, I'm sorry, nothing I can do. The airport's open, get her a flight. She ended up getting out through Europe recently. But it's pretty disheartening to hear that your 15-year-old daughter, your friend's 15-year-old daughter, is on her own when she's in a war zone. So I'm thankful for people who have stepped up in order to try and get people out. The DeSantis Airlines pulling Florida citizens and other people who are around out and getting them out of that conflict zone is good, because the more Americans that are in harm's way, the more likely it is that we'll get pulled into World War III. So removing our people who want to get out of there, I think, is good for world peace and for their safety.
Another example of us getting pulled into a conflict will be World War I. The reason we got in that was because Germany was trying to send a message to Mexico to convince them to start fighting in World War I against the U.S. And England intercepted that on like a submarine or something like that. I think I have that right, but that's what I read that once, and that's how we got in World War I. And yeah, on the whole evacuation thing, there's way too many people that are being evacuated. It's just crazy how many people are there right now. I saw it on the news the other day. There's families all over the country, especially in New England. And again, just another example of Biden mishandling another foreign crisis.
Absolutely. I actually was invited to go on a trip to Taiwan. 2 of my House colleagues are in Taiwan right now on a diplomatic effort. But right now, given the situation, the idea of going into what could be a third theater if China goes after Taiwan just wasn't something I could do with my 3 boys at home. Now, it's kind of scary when you're worried about how safe you'll be if you travel abroad.
Yeah, I was reading about that Taiwan trip too. I believe it's Representative Moffett and
Representative Wallace, yes.
I'm excited to see what happens with that. I think Taiwan, we need to start becoming allies with them a lot more. We need to start getting closer to them because China's going to invade them. I think it's inevitable at this point.
It's a matter of when, not if.
Yeah.
And I actually had the opportunity back when I was in high school to meet some girls from Taiwan. We played in a field hockey tournament together, and that was really neat.
Yeah, Pinkerton just had some exchange students from Germany, actually. So,
Oh, that's fantastic.
yeah, they stayed for like 2 weeks. It was really cool.
Oh, nice.
They were awesome, but
It's always good when you can put a face to it, because
Yeah.
then it's not just some country far away, but it's somebody you've met and talked to.
yeah. So, big topic for me at least would be school board in Derry. I was in a major disagreement with the school board last night. So, fill anyone in, there's the whole school closure crisis happening here in Derry. We have 5 elementary schools. We're going to have one closed at the end of this school year, Derry Village. And they want to close South Range as well now. And they want to try to build a big new school. And a lot of the parents are standing up saying, we don't want this. These are our kids. But the school board has just dismissed them. They listen. They pretend to listen at least. But they're not hearing them. I think there's a difference between listening and hearing. And last night, I did my Pinkerton update. In my role, I just give updates on what's going on at Pinkerton, nothing much there. But they cut this woman off after she was trying to clarify something she said. The way they do it in Derry is that everyone asks their questions first, and then the entire school board answers all the questions at the same time. And this woman tried to clarify what she had asked, and the chair of the school board basically shot her down. And I saw that, and I'm like, no, I'm not letting that happen. So I got up from my desk, I walked up to her and said, hey, I'll say what you wanted to say, because I'm up there, and they're not going to stop me. So she wrote down what she wanted to say. I went back up there. I was polite. I waited till the other 7 were done talking. And I said, Mr. Chair, I'd like to say something. And he kind of laughed at me, because I don't think they take me seriously. And I read it, and then I turned, because I'm on the wing. The desk is kind of like this, and I'm on the wing here. So I turned around to face the audience, and I'm like turned away from the board. And I pointed at the board, and I said, if these guys are not going to listen to you, you guys can contact me. And they cut me off saying I was disparaging them and that I wouldn't be allowed to talk if I continue to be disrespectful, which you can go back on YouTube on the DerryCAM YouTube channel. I'm plugging you guys. This is where we film DerryCAM. Go on their YouTube channel, watch the school board meeting yourself, watch where I talk. It's the second time I talk, not the first. I don't think I was disrespectful. I think I was just saying an obvious truth that the board did not want me to say. And if they think shutting me up is going to work by doing that, I'll just speak during public forum. They can't stop me there. And if they try to kick me off of my post on the school board, I'm going to make their lives a living hell. That's a promise. But I'm just disturbed that a local government thinks that they're a dictatorship. They think they're above the public, which they're not. They're school board members. They serve us. We are the boss of them. But they forget that. And I hope when this new school is on the ballot this March, I hope that it fails, because I want all 5 schools to stay. Well, it's going to be 4, because Derry Village is closing either way. So I want the 4 to stay. And frankly, I think if it fails, I think all of them should resign. I think they're bringing shame to this town. Maybe they do care, but they don't care in the way the voters want them to care. And I think it's disturbing a lot of people in Derry. And I think we need change. We need to get out and vote. That snowstorm back in March messed up Derry in a whole new way that we couldn't have even imagined, because no one went out and voted. No one. And our schools are now in ruin because it snowed 3 feet that day, because we re-elected members of the board that should not have been re-elected. Well, there were new members, I should say. And now we're faced with 7 inept people that are going to ruin the schools. Or 6, I should say 6.
And that's such a challenging position to be in for you, because on that school board, it's not run the way that a committee or a hearing is run when you're doing things with best practices. If you have best practices, you try and make sure that people are recognized, make sure that you have consistency and that you do it with fairness. And when I've run committees and when I've had training on this from the House Clerk and from others, sometimes you break some of those rules because somebody really has something they need to say. If you're lumping all of the comments and questions together and then you inaccurately took it down or for some reason aren't answering the question that was asked, that's an appropriate time to recognize somebody, making it clear that this is an exception, but we will let you clarify that, but this is the only time. That's how you run a fair meeting and make sure that people's voices are heard, because the whole point of local government is so that people's voices are heard. That's why the state delegates so much to the towns and the school boards, and that's why it's so important for people to show up and vote. I think probably the most disturbing thing about the whole school process is the complete lack of understanding about the school building aid process and the way that other towns go about these building projects. They don't raise money and then figure out what they're going to do with it. They come with a plan. They have a plan. They make sure that there's buy-in from the voters. They work towards it. They figure out how they're going to finance it without putting out a bond at historically high interest rates. And don't just hope that this time something's going to work. No, it's one of those challenges and one of the reasons why it's hard to increase the school building aid formula and the amount that's out there, because you want to make sure that if the taxpayers across the state are paying for a new school, that it's well thought out and well reasoned. Because we have plenty of schools that, had they been designed differently or planned differently, wouldn't need the same kind of maintenance or repair. Although, don't get me started on the maintenance. They're doing $25 million for maintenance of the schools, and just last night they presented only a few of the schools, excluding South Range School, and that came to $33 million in costs. They're only asking the voters for $25 million, which means that they know that they'll be coming back to the well and asking you, not just this March, but the following March, to finance even more when it's hard enough for people to keep up with their mortgage payments or their rents. It's irresponsible, and I think that we need to get back to teaching math a little bit more, because if they understood math and basic finance more, we wouldn't be in this predicament.
I remember saying on Facebook last night, Pinkerton actually offers leadership classes. I think they should have taken those too. And frankly, I think this school board needs to be dissolved entirely. I think we need to merge the school department into the town or city. If it means that we have to become a city, I'd be okay with that. I think we need to bring this board under control, because they're the reason taxes are so high here.
They are. It's 68% of your property taxes are for the schools. It's a lot of people don't understand just how much that is and just how much that's impacting every single family here. If we were a city, we also wouldn't be voting in March. We'd be voting in November. And then that would be a consistent schedule of every November you vote. Sometimes it's just for city, sometimes it's also state and federal. I think there's a lot of process that would need to happen. Apparently we were a city for a hot minute. I think it was about 7 years. And apparently that was an interesting process. It was before I moved to town. And while I listen to the recaps and read the stories, I know now that believe half of what you read and a quarter of what you're told, and then realize that there's probably a little bit more to everything. But that's all right. We're all humans. But we do need to make sure that we're not concentrating control and power in people who aren't actually listening to the people who voted for them.
Democracy comes with acting and listening, not one or the other.
Yes, yes.
They are listening, but they're not acting on what the public wants. And like I said, I think they should all resign. But that's just my opinion. Feel free to go back and watch the meeting yourself. It was the October 24th meeting. This will be out Friday, which is, today's the 25th, that would be the 27th, so make sure you go watch that. And yeah.
And then also with that, if anybody is interested in these issues and interested in learning how to run for school board, local office, or state office, there's a lot of different trainings that are going on. I can connect people with different school board groups, different training groups within the state, just to understand what the job entails and what goes on. The school board, there's 2 different school board associations in New Hampshire, and I believe the New Hampshire School Board Association offers a lot of training on how to run the meetings. I know that in the past, previous chairmen had not attended those, and I'm hopeful I'm not sure, but I'm hopeful that the current one either has or will go, because that would go a long way to actually making sure people are listened to.
He did not.
He did not.
I believe it was another member that did, not
Okay.
him.
That is unfortunate, because it takes a lot of work to make sure that you can fairly run a hearing and a meeting, because you're balancing a lot of different things, and you want to make sure that you're not tipping the scales for your own personal opinion.
So that's it for the topics I had. I know you had a couple bills you wanted to discuss, so feel free to go ahead.
Thank you, Anthony. There are a few different bills that are coming up. First off, I wanted to let you know veto day is tomorrow, although we'll probably, I'm not sure when this
It'll
posts.
be yesterday when this comes out.
Okay, it'll be yesterday. So that's basically when the House and Senate show up, we don't get our mileage, and we respond to all the vetoes from the governor. So if the governor has vetoed and not signed a bill, if 2/3 of the House or the Senate, if it's a House or Senate bill, votes to override the governor, it'll go to the other. That's one of those areas where, back when the Democrats had control of the House, Sununu was fantastic in vetoing the anti-gun legislation and anti-gun owner legislation. And we were able to sustain those vetoes, which was good. Now we're dealing with the Burgess bio plant, and we're also dealing with some more clarity around some of the occupational licensing. But I'm getting a little wonky. I know I do that sometimes. The other things we're doing is we have about 200 bills that were retained. So we dealt with most of our bills before June, but now there's about those 200 bills that are a little bit more complex or needed a little bit more time. And so right now we're hearing those. One of the ones that we're hearing, and I'm chairing the subcommittee on, is on the transgender bill, House Bill 619. I think that bill was very broad-reaching, and it tried to deal with both medical care, in-school issues, and the conversion therapy definition. The really big concern with people who are interested in keeping this going forward is just to make sure that you don't have children making life-altering decisions that they'll never be able to undo. When you have a surgery, it'll never be as good as it once was. Even when you break your leg, a surgery to repair that has challenges. We're narrowing the bill down to just the genital gender reassignment surgeries, because we've been told that they don't happen in New Hampshire. But there's a lot of fear about the fact that they may be happening, because if you're doing this and creating these body parts, it's a very intense process, and one that usually takes many, many years to successfully do and to successfully walk through that process. We're doing that, and then we're using some language from the World Professional Association for Transgender Health to better clarify the conversion therapy language. Obviously, nobody should be locked in a closet and electroshocked or water tortured to change their gender or their sexuality. That's just horrible. But the problem is the way that it was written. It's written in a way that really scares a lot of psychologists from working with kids, working with anybody under 18. And we know, especially after this whole COVID process, a lot of people need help coping and dealing with the heavy things that they're dealing with. We have fewer mental health professionals for minors in New Hampshire because they're afraid that if somebody says, my life would be so much easier if I were a boy, that now they need to positively affirm them towards being a boy, even though that wasn't their intent, because the language just isn't clear. So we're looking at bringing some language in from the WPATH, which is sort of the one that's moving all of transgender medicine forward and having more and more intervention, using their language that says you can't have any action to coerce somebody and to change their sex or their gender, because that's just wrong. Unless somebody says, doctor, I feel this way, but I don't want to, help me. If somebody asks for help, we should be able to help them, but that should be a rare case. That should just be one of those cases where it's respecting the individual and what they want, not what everybody around them is saying. So we're going to work through that. We have the language that'll be coming out in this next calendar, and we'll be having a hearing just on the specifics of that. It's no longer a large, wide-ranging bill, but it's just focused on, should we be doing genital surgery on minors? There's exemptions for intersex or danger or damage, or even if you had an illegal surgery and it went wrong. Fix people in those cases. That's not what people are worried about. It's generally a 6 or 7 year process to get to the genital surgery for adults. We just need to make sure it's not fast-tracked for minors. And then the other is clarifying the language to be more respectful of anybody who would be going for mental health care. So I think that a lot of people have misconstrued the intentions, and they say that it's marginalizing people. But personally, I think that saying that talking about an important health issue is going to cause people to harm themselves is really just planting a seed that's really dangerous in people's minds. Because everybody should feel comfortable going to somebody, especially somebody trained, for help. They shouldn't feel that just because they're part of a group that they're going to be pushed off to the side.
I've said it many times on the show, but mental health is the biggest crisis in America.
Yes, it is. It is. And right now, the conversion therapy law is limiting the number of people who are coming to practice in New Hampshire. We can write it better and still keep the intent. So I'm hopeful that we're able to make that clear and that people can actually read what's written and not impose what their own thoughts are on our intent and on the bill.
I think we need to make this bill clear to high schoolers also, because this impacts high schoolers more than anyone. Okay. I think the representatives that are doing this, including you, should find a way to make it so high schoolers understand this, maybe reach out to, I don't know, youth groups or so, I don't know. But
that's a great idea. I'd love your help in that. We had actually looked at putting some of the informed consent around puberty blockers, because those are in the young adults that they're used in. Generally, it's only up to the time you're 11. But if you're using it for gender reasons, you're 11 and older. So we just don't have information. But that's a challenging thing to do, and we didn't want to reach any further than we thought was appropriate. Because it's really important that if you're going to do this, you understand the consequences. And understand the consequences of not doing it too. It needs to be a full and open dialogue, but hopefully we can set some things up with some of the youth groups, maybe host some events and talk about what the real concerns are. And it's not that we want to erase people, it's that we want to keep people safe.
I know the one in Raymond, that's a big one. I remember they did some a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
But yeah, we're just about out of time, so feel free to give closing remarks before we end.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm really happy that you invited me on, Anthony, and I'm really glad that I was able to hop in on short notice. If there's anything I can do for you, I'm always happy to do that, because you're standing up and giving a voice to our students and giving a voice to your generation that's kind of being drowned out, especially on social media. And the way that you stand up, I think, is really impressive. And I want to invite anybody who wants to learn more about state government to contact me. I can let you know when there's interesting hearings, when we're meeting in the House, and just sort of what goes on behind the scenes, because maybe some of you are as crazy as me and want to do that.
And I'd like to remind anyone that's a school board nerd that, I forget all their policies are like 4-letter words. I don't remember what they are, but the policy about the student government spot gives me the right to speak. They don't say anything about me not being able to speak. So I'm going to keep doing that. If they're going to try to shut me up, I'm going to yell. So I'm Anthony Henry. This has been America's Ass. Thank you for watching.